Imagine you've woken up from a dream and for a moment you were just laying there, staring at the ceiling. Not because you were tired, because something in that dream felt so real, so specific, so yours, that coming back to this room, this life, this version of yourself felt like the wrong direction. Maybe it was a place you've never been but knew by heart. Maybe it was a person you've never met but missed the moment you opened your eyes. Maybe it was just a feeling, vast, quiet, and completely impossible to explain to anyone who wasn't inside it with you. And then the day started, and you let it go. Because that's what you do with dreams. But it stayed with you, didn't it? Somewhere underneath the emails and the errands and the noise of being alive in this particular life, it stayed, like something unfinished, like a conversation that got cut off before the important part. Here's what nobody tells you. That feeling isn't a glitch. It isn't your brain being dramatic. It isn't sentiment or sleep deprivation or the residue of something you watched before bed. That feeling is a signal. And the question worth sitting with, the one we're going to explore together, slowly and honestly, is this. What if your dreams aren't being generated by your mind at all? What if they're being received by it? Not as a metaphor, not as a spiritual comfort, but as a genuine physical possibility. One that lives at the intersection of quantum mechanics, neuroscience, and the kind of ancient philosophical intuition that keeps showing up across every culture that ever tried to understand what a human being actually is. We're not here to convince you of anything. We're here to look at something together. To take seriously, for a few minutes, what your sleeping mind has been trying to show you. Because if what we're about to explore is even partially true, that dream you keep dismissing, it wasn't random noise, someone sent it. Think about the strangest character you've ever met in a dream. Maybe a person, someone with a specific face, a specific way of holding their shoulders, a laugh you could pick out of a crowd. Someone who looked at you with a familiarity so complete, it felt like being known at a molecular level. And when you woke up, they were gone entirely. No name or history. No explanation for why losing them felt like losing someone real. Where did that person come from? The standard answer is that the brain is a collage artist. It stitches together fragments, a stranger's jawline, an old teacher's voice, the posture of someone you passed on the street, and manufactures a composite, plausible, economical, and somehow completely unsatisfying when you're lying there at 6 in the morning, missing someone who, by all logical accounts, never existed. Carl Jung had a different intuition. He noticed that across cultures, across centuries, across people who had never shared a language or a landmass, the same figures kept appearing in dreams. The wise old man, the shadow, the trickster, the anima. He called them archetypes, universal patterns embedded in what he named the collective unconscious. A shared psychological inheritance that every human being carries, whether they know it or not. Jung thought these figures were symbols, internal representations of parts of ourselves we hadn't yet integrated. But here's where we're going to gently push the door a little further open. What if they aren't symbols of who you could be, but echoes of who you already are, somewhere else? Your waking mind, what we might call the logical self, is extraordinarily good at one thing, keeping you here, present, anchored to this specific timeline, this specific identity, this specific version of the story. It filters out an almost incomprehensible amount of information every second. The thalamus, a small relay station buried deep in the center of the brain, acts as the gatekeeper, deciding what sensory data gets through and what gets quietly discarded before you're ever aware of it. During REM sleep, that gatekeeper steps away from the door. The flood of incoming sensory noise from the physical world drops to almost nothing. The brain, suddenly freed from the task of managing your immediate 3D reality, does something remarkable. It begins receiving. Not imagining, not replaying, receiving. And what it picks up, stripped of the ego's need to make everything familiar and safe, is information that doesn't quite fit the shape of a single life. That's why dream logic feels so strange. It's not that your mind is being sloppy. It's that your mind is trying to translate something that arrived in a format it wasn't originally designed to read. The people you meet there, the ones who feel realer than real, maybe the reason you don't recognize them is simpler than you think. You haven't met them here. In 1957, a physicist named Hugh Everett proposed something that the scientific community initially received the way most people receive an alarm at 3 in the morning, with irritation and a strong desire to go back to sleep. His idea was this: quantum mechanics, taken seriously and followed all the way to its logical conclusion, doesn't describe a universe that makes one choice at every crossroads. It describes a universe that makes all of them. Every time a quantum event occurs, every time a particle could go left or right, every time a possibility hangs suspended between outcomes, reality doesn't collapse into one answer, it branches. Both paths are taken. Both worlds continue. Silently, simultaneously, forever. He called it the many worlds interpretation. Most people call it the multiverse. Now here's where it gets personal. In our waking state, the brain is doing something that physicists call decoherence, a process by which quantum possibilities collapse into a single, stable, classical reality. Your thalamus, your sensory system, your relentless ego narrative, all of it is constantly performing this collapse. Every moment of waking consciousness is essentially a vote. This timeline, this version, this you. It's an extraordinary act of focus. And like all acts of extraordinary focus, it comes at a cost. What you're focusing on, you can receive. What you're focusing away from, the branching, the other paths, the versions of the story that didn't collapse into this room, this body, this morning, those get filtered out. Not destroyed, just unheard. Think of it like a radio. Your waking mind is locked onto one frequency. Clear signal, strong reception, everything else is static. But the other stations aren't gone. They're broadcasting continuously, carrying their own music, their own news, their own version of your voice saying things you never said in this life. Sleep is when someone reaches over and slowly turns the dial. As the thalamus quiets, as the sensory flood recedes, as the ego loosens its grip on the singular narrative of you, the brain enters something we might call biological superposition. A state where it is no longer fully committed to one channel, where the boundaries between this version of reality and adjacent ones become, for a few hours, genuinely permeable. What comes through isn't always clean. It isn't a download with a timestamp and a sender address. It arrives the way all signals arrive when the receiver wasn't quite built for the frequency. Fragmented, emotionally vivid, spatially strange. A city that follows dream logic, a conversation that changes rooms mid-sentence, a feeling of enormous consequence attached to an image that makes no rational sense. That's not your brain malfunctioning, that's your brain doing its best with information that originated somewhere it has never been. And here's the part that should make you pause the next time you're tempted to dismiss what happened last night as random noise. The interference isn't one-directional. If you are occasionally tuning into the frequency of another version of you, then right now, in some branching corridor of reality you will never consciously visit, another version of you is dreaming. And in that dream, they're trying to make sense of you. Let's talk about the nightmare, not the abstract, cinematic kind, the one with the monster or the endless corridor, the specific kind, the one where you lose someone, where something you built collapses, where you make a choice and feel, in the full weight of your body, exactly what it costs. You wake up and the relief is immediate. It wasn't real, but the residue stays. The grief, the warning, the cold, specific knowledge of what it feels like to go down that road. Here's the question nobody asks. How does your brain know what it feels like to lose something it hasn't lost yet? Threat simulation theory, one of the more compelling evolutionary explanations for dreaming, suggests that the sleeping mind rehearses danger, that dreams are a kind of internal training ground, running simulations of worst-case scenarios so that when they arrive in waking life, we aren't encountering them for the first time. It's a useful theory, practical, Darwinian, but it only explains the mechanism. It doesn't explain the specificity. It doesn't explain why your nightmare about losing your job arrives 3 weeks before the conversation that changes everything. It doesn't explain why you dreamed of a particular road with a particular quality of light and then found yourself standing on it under circumstances you couldn't have anticipated. It doesn't explain why some people wake up from a dream about a person they haven't spoken to in years, reach for their phone with a feeling they can't justify, and find a message waiting. What if the simulation isn't being generated from within? What if the data isn't coming from your imagination rehearsing the future, but from a version of you who already lived it? Think about what that would mean. Somewhere in the branching architecture of all possible lives, there is a version of you who took the risk you're currently avoiding. Who stayed when you left, who left when you stayed, who said the thing you swallowed. That version of you accumulated something: experience, damage, wisdom, grief, and in the quantum permeability of sleep, some of that accumulated data finds its way across the membrane as a feeling you can't ignore, your anxiety about a specific situation that hasn't happened yet. What if that isn't fear of the unknown? What if it's the emotional memory of someone who already knows? Your sudden, sourceless certainty that a particular path leads somewhere dark. What if that isn't intuition in the mystical sense, but intelligence in the most literal one? Data, inherited from a parallel self who paid for it in ways you were spared. The nightmare, reframed, isn't a punishment. It isn't your mind torturing you for no reason in the dark. It's a gift, wrapped poorly, arriving at an inconvenient hour, carrying information you didn't ask for and almost certainly need. The version of you who sent it didn't have the luxury of sparing your feelings. They just needed you to know. So if there are a million versions of you, dreaming, living, choosing, losing, in a million branching corridors of reality, here's the question that makes the whole architecture tremble. Who is the one watching? Not the you who wakes up, not the you who dreams, not the you who made the choice that sent reality splitting in a different direction at some unmarked moment 10 years ago. The one behind all of those, the one who remains when you stop thinking about your name, your history, your obligations, your reflection. The presence that is still there in the half second after the hypnic jerk, before the room loads and the personality reassembles itself like furniture being carried back in after a flood. That one, who is that? Eastern philosophy has been sitting with this question for a very long time. In the non-dual traditions, Advaita Vedanta, certain schools of Buddhism, the Sufi poets who wrote about annihilation as homecoming, the answer is consistent and quietly radical. There is only one consciousness, not many minds observing one universe, one awareness experiencing itself through an infinite number of temporary filters. Every person, every life, every version of every choice, all of it is a single light passing through an infinite number of prisms. Jung approached it from a different angle and arrived somewhere surprisingly close. The shadow, all the unlived potential, the suppressed choices, the roads not taken, isn't separate from you, it's the rest of you. The self is not a fixed point, it's a spectrum. And the work of a life, in Jung's view, is not to defend the identity you've constructed, but to slowly, courageously expand your awareness of everything you actually are. Now hold both of those ideas at once. If consciousness is singular, if the I is a localized filter rather than a sealed container, then the version of you dreaming in a parallel corridor isn't a stranger, isn't a ghost, isn't even, technically, another person. It's you wearing a different set of circumstances like a different coat. The grief you feel for lives you haven't lived isn't homesickness for somewhere else. It's the faint, persistent signal of your own vastness. A reminder that the person sitting in this chair, in this room, reading these words is not the whole story, is not even close to the whole story. You are the witness of the multiverse, not a passenger in one timeline, but the awareness that makes all timelines possible. The dreamer isn't lost when they wake up. They just forgot for a moment how large they actually are. Tonight, when the room goes dark and the day finally stops asking things of you, I want you to try something different. Don't just go to sleep. Listen, not for anything specific. Not with the part of you that makes lists and solves problems and needs everything to resolve into something useful by morning. Listen the way you'd listen to a conversation happening in the next room. Present, patient, without the pressure of needing to understand every word. Because the territory you're about to enter isn't empty. It never was. It's the most vast, unmapped landscape you have access to, more expansive than any ocean, more layered than any city. And you cross its border every single night without a passport, without a guide, and almost always without paying attention. That changes now, or it can if you let it. The physics suggests the door is real. The biology explains why it only opens in the dark. The philosophy reminds you that the one walking through it was never as small as you thought. So tonight, don't ask for rest, ask for correspondence. Lie down not as someone escaping the day, but as someone leaning in, ear to the wall of reality, curious about what's moving on the other side. And if you wake up tomorrow carrying a new idea, a new fear, or a new love you can't explain, pause before you dismiss it. Ask yourself honestly, was that yours? Or did you inherit it from the one who stayed awake while you slept? Thanks for watching.